Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our first Monday night workshop for January 2018. Yay! I was going to go through the schedule, but I don't have the schedule on me, so just hang on. I'll get a newsletter out hopefully the end of this week. I've still been sick, so going a little slow this year, but I'm grateful that y'all came out tonight, as well as those of you who are watching us this evening. Sending our, of course, naturally sending our prayers and thoughts to Canada, for those of you freezing up there, but for California with the rain and the possible mudslides, and of course New York and East Coast. I think I'll just stop talking right now with all of the cold weather that they're having. Naturally, we're enjoying our wonderful weather out here. I've been driving around with the top down because it's been so nice out. I like that. This evening, I wanted to talk a little bit about inspiration, because you know how New Year's comes and everyone has New Year's resolutions, and this is what I want to do. So I always used to like the idea that in December, if you were at the gyms, they're really pushing the sales for Christmas presents, you know, buy memberships. And so January, there'd be a lot of people, and then February kind of half, and by March, nobody's there anymore. And that's just one thing that people normally talk about, is how do you keep the inspiration going, or the motivation to continue going? Working out, of course, is always harder because you don't see the immediate effects. You know, I know some people, I tried it twice, it didn't work. Well, you had to keep going. So I'm waiting for a dog to run in and attack me. But anyway, tonight I wanted to talk about finding our inspiration. Thomas Edison had a great quote. He says, almost everybody knows this: genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. Perspiration, that's it. So that means you have to work hard. The inspiration happens like that, and then it's work. You have to do the work to get it inspired or continuing on. So I was thinking about the question of what inspires you. I often get this question at the end of a training. Somebody will say, why do you do what you do? What inspires you? And I always find that really hard to answer. For me personally, it's just what I do. Like, what? So then I have to think about the things that do inspire me, and there are a lot of things that inspire me. People, places. We were just talking about Sedona. I love Sedona, being in nature. That inspires me, being up there with a beautiful breeze and the nice sun. And you can be inspired up there just by that. I can be inspired by reading books, love to read. So as I said, it's hard for me to find the exact answer to satisfy the question, what inspires you? Because I feel like, did I walk too far? Sorry, thank you. Right here. My floor director is telling me where to stand. So what inspires me, I was thinking back in the 90s, I was really big into Carlos Castaneda. Has anybody ever read those series?
Oh.
There you go. So Carlos Castaneda, first one, The Teachings of Don Juan. So The Teachings of Don Juan, and then loved that, then moved on to the next one, and moved on to the next one. I don't know, there were about 12 or 14 books. I don't remember how many there were. His students started writing for him. So, but anyway, I remember reading it, and oh yeah, this is great. But honestly, I cannot tell you what the lessons were. I know I was inspired. I knew I felt motivated to get the next book. This is in the 90s, so granted, I'm a little bit older. My memory is not working as much as it used to, but I can't tell you why I was inspired by them. I knew I was inspired by the teaching side. Do you remember Controlled Folly? He talked a little bit about that. The Dream World, I know we talked a little bit about that, and the mind and mental, and I remember I connected it a little bit to the Hermetic philosophy, but honestly, without looking back through the book again, I can't tell you what inspired me. But I remember clearly feeling so inspired. I get the next book, and then I get the next book, because I was so inspired to continue reading that. And this happens to me all the time. So if I find a book that I love, I'm off to the next one. I just actually did this last year. One of my clients had recommended a book series, the Glass Throne series, I think it was. And of all things, it was an assassin. But it was like in medieval kind of magical creatures, which I love. And it ended up being that the assassin was a good person, and they ended up really tried everything they could to not try to kill people. and magical, and so I loved it. One book, Mark can attest to this. I would sit there 13 hours straight, just read the book. I'll look up, oh, what time is it? And then I'm just going to, because I absorb myself into it. Now, I just read that series, so of course, naturally, I still remember it. But next year, if you ask me, not sure. Harry Potter, though, I still could do pretty good with Harry Potter, although I couldn't tell you exactly was it every single book. Overall, I remember that, and I'm sure the movies kind of help with that. But I remember the idea of being inspired. So, my library, I have an extensive library. I have a library that is not all out. I have a library where the books are still in boxes from the moves that I've had, and I haven't opened them yet. They're still, because there's no room. So I've always loved to collect books ever since I was a little girl. And the idea is, I love that, like if I read one book, oh yeah, I want to get the next of what these series, like Roy Masters, I have a bunch of his. Isaac Bentov was the one who did the Pendulum, but I'm trying to think of John Baines. John Baines was another one, The Secret Love and Secret Science, I believe was some of them. Anyway, I read one and I bought like 4 more because I figured, oh, these would be really good too. And they're on my list of to get read. I have a very methodical, strange way of doing this, but I inputted every book that I own into an Excel spreadsheet, and I would highlight completed reading or currently reading or ones that need to be read next. I'm insane. There's well over 500 books on that list. It's really, and then you know what I end up doing? Buying a new book that's not even on that list and reading that book. That's how wonderful my organized life is. Anyway, when I get to the idea of the books, I was thinking about this, that I have so many books or people that I get inspired, and it's really not the book itself, like I think the words, but it's really not the words, it's the person, the author. There are some authors I really like, read, and some I don't. And I found very curious that ghostwriters, I actually can now tell when an author isn't writing the book anymore. Like they first started out and then someone else came on, because the text changes, the format changes. I mean, I think I just become attuned with the author and the reason why I like the book so much. And now I can read and go, oh, no. And so there's been a couple of instances where I've bought a series and when I get to the second or third one, I don't like it anymore, but I still have them. It's my set. And I'll try to get through it one day. I remember one time George was talking to me and I was trying to read the book Genesis Revisited, for those of you who have tried to read that book. It's a hard book to read. I got maybe 20 pages in, and I do book clubs with friends that I'll read books. So my friend Nicole, I was reading with her, and I met with her and said, do you mind if we stop reading this book? And she's like, I totally don't mind. And the reason why I got to that is I was really struggling with this book, and George said to me, who told you you had to read a book just because you started it? You could stop. It never occurred to me I didn't have to read a book. I always thought you start the book, you finish the book. You know, maybe there's some little gem in there. When George gave me permission not to read the book, I've put several books down now. Not a lot, but there are been several. The 2 notable ones are Genesis Revisited and The Art of War. Has anybody tried to read The Art of War? And you finished it? That doesn't surprise me. But it's a difficult book. It's beyond me. So not to say they're bad books. I know lots of people quote from them, but not for me. So George gave me permission to not have to read those books anymore, but I still hold on to them. That's the sad thing. Why am I? Because I'm thinking one day I'll get back to it and I might see it with a different set of eyes, or I might have a different awareness and be able to read it better. So I have the hope in there. What I did was, and then I was thinking about my books today, and I also inherited George's library. So that was his books that he had down at the Omega building, as well as the books that were in his house. And he had books that were in boxes that are the boxed books that are in my possession now. I tried to get rid of duplicate copies, but then there were some that were originals, and no, George wrote in it, I want to keep it, sentimental value. One day I'm going to get to it. Kind of one day never seems to come. So anyway, I looked around at my books today. Lots of the books that George gave me, these are ones that just sit around collecting dust, if I did take them out of the boxes, or I do have a series that are reference books. I know, flat out. He even said to me, don't read these, reference. So I have about 20, 30 reference books that George had passed on to me. And then the ones that I have the most of is I have 66 books by Manly P. Hall. He is my favorite author. And believe it or not, I counted. I've read 43 of them. And I'm currently still reading them. So it is my intention to finish them. He's an easy one. I love reading him. So that's still 66 books from one person. And that's not all that he's written. There's a lot more that I haven't collected yet. The next one that I have the most of is Torquem. I have 30 or so books of his, and I use these a lot as reference books, but I like the way he's written as well. And Torquem Ceridarium, the gentleman that lived up in Sedona, I've only read 8 from cover to cover. Most of them I kind of open and glean through, but I've only read 8. And then I was thinking about, okay, if I don't look at the authors, what about the topics? So in my library, and what really drew my attention, my son was in my office the other day, and he's standing there and he said, you know, I really like that you look at this section and it's leadership, coaching, astronomy, and how to be healthy. And he goes, do they all go together? And I'm like, I think so. I don't know. That's just the middle one. I said over here. And then, so here's the topics I have. I have meditation, numerology books, Kabbalah books, ageless wisdom books, fourth way books, science books, astronomy books, and personal growth books. And that really, and then a variety of other little things that are in there, Harry Potter and so on. And this doesn't even include my husband's continual edition of our business books. There are well over, and I'm not kidding, hundreds of coaching, leadership, and business books. I'm not kidding. In the office alone, there are 2 shelves that have over 50 books. Just 2 shelves. And there's like another one that has 3. And then we have a bookshelf that's in my daughter's room. I'm sure there's at least 200 in there. So we have a lot of books. And he likes to buy multiple copies so we can hand them out. So we have lots of multiple copy books too. As a matter of fact, I was going to bring some in here to hand out to you guys to pass on the information. So again, what I was thinking of, the idea that I hold on to these books is because I'm looking for inspiration. One day I'm going to have inspiration. I actually thought about this. How many books have I ever picked back up again and read a second time? Have you ever read a book a second time? Excellent. That's almost everybody in here. So when you read it the second time, do you see it with a different set of eyes? Yes, you saw it with a different set of eyes? Meh, most of the time we do.
Sometimes, yeah.
So when I've picked up a book to read it additionally, what I usually do is I look for, because I highlight a lot, especially if I'm using it for research or reading. So I look for the highlighted and I think, oh, yeah, that was a good point. Or why did I highlight that book? And then, so this is how, I'll read the first time in yellow, and then the second time I'll flip through it in a green highlighter or a pink one. Like I'll try to do different highlights so I'll see where I was. Not that that matters. But for the most part, when I look through a book a second time, I never read it from cover to cover. I kind of just glance through it, or I'll go to a section that I know I really liked. The Harry Potter books. I loved the Harry Potter books. I actually tried to read it again, and I wasn't interested. And I think it's because the movies came out, and it's just easier to pop the movie in than it is to read the book. Anyway, I keep my books around, like I said, because I'm looking for inspiration. And then, like I already mentioned, the idea of going to inspiration to nature. I love being outside. I love being out in the, like we were just talking about, being in Sedona. When I first came to Arizona, I used to hike Camelback Mountain every weekend. I'd go out there and go for a hike. North Mountain, I would hike. Squaw Peak. We're not allowed to say Squaw Peak anymore. What is it? That place. So I used to hike a great deal, and being outside, you get inspired. I remember one time I was hiking up the Phoenix Mountain Preserve, and I was just a little bit higher, almost at the peak, and I looked down, and I am not kidding you, a hawk flew below me. I was higher than it. It must have taken off from its nest. It was maybe 10 feet from me. And I don't think it saw me because I was above it. It was the first time I saw a hawk flying from above. Like you always see underneath looking up. And I'm like, ah! And, you know, cameras going like, ah! And I didn't get a picture of it, but it was beautiful. In those moments, you can't really take pictures. It's more of the experience of what you're having. So, of course, I've done the hikes, the pine trees. I've done kayaking, rappelling, splunking, caving, going down, and love doing stuff like that where you get inspired. So of the many experiences that I've had, there are some that I've actually tried to repeat, like the kayaking with the killer whales. So the first time I went kayaking, sorry, orcas is probably a more appropriate term. Kayaking with the orcas. So the first time I went, terrified, and left worse off than I was already afraid. I left worse off than I was when I first went there. So I made myself go back a second time thinking I'll be able to conquer. And I was able to conquer the fear. And the second time, beautiful experience. They had what they call a super pod. So all of the pods that live in the area came together and were going down the strait. 45 minutes. I sat in my kayak and watched pod after pod, over 100 whales just go by us. It was beautiful. Love that. They swam underneath us. Very cool. So I went back the third year. Extremely disappointing. It's like I conquered my fear, and then it's like, meh, there's one over there. That's nice. And oh, there's one over there. And I've had this experience before where I've tried to recreate an inspirational moment, and it never quite felt good. Sometimes it was good, but never quite. Most of the time in the classroom in Omega, there are some things that I do that I think, but I know for the people it's the first time and they're experiencing. And that's why you never do the same activity with another person. No, with the same person, excuse me, because they've done it already. That's why those of us, I'll say red, black game, but everyone, so when you play it once, that's it. You can't play it a second time because you know how it gets done. So there's certain things that are only just like one-time inspirational moments. The ahas go on. Anyway, I was thinking of asking you these questions. So the first question I have is, when was the last time that you were truly inspired? When was the last time you had a true inspiration? So just think of that, a true inspiration. And while you're thinking of it, what were you doing? Were you trying to be inspired, or did it just hit you? Were you in the middle of a project and all of a sudden pieces came together, or the light bulb went on, or you saw something that you had never seen before? Did you feel depleted when you got inspired? Did you feel annoyed or frustrated? Most people don't. When you have an inspiration, you feel energetic, excited, electrified. You're like, whoa! And most of the time, that's what we do. We're like, we have that moment. Like I said, we like to call those the aha moments. The moments where your light bulb goes on and you just go, what just, huh? George used to tell the story of, I do not remember, I think the man's name was Handel, the composer, who got the Messiah in a flash. And then it took him several months, I think it was, to write it all down. That's what inspiration is. It happens that quick, and then to translate it or to work it into it, it takes time. That's why Edison's 99% perspiration is what it means. You get it like that, but then to actually put it into effect is really difficult to do. So what I did was I looked at the idea of inspiration. You can't force inspiration. It can't be bought. You can't coerce it. It's something that has to happen. There are certain steps you must follow in order to get inspired. When I thought about inspiration, of course, I love the dictionary. It's one of my favorite places to go. The definition of inspiration is a divine influence or action, on a person believed to qualify him or her to receive and communicate sacred revelations. This is the first definition. So divine, meaning not you, it came from someplace else. And in order for you to have it, you receive communication. That's the definition. Divinity and receive communication. That's inspiration. Number 2, the action or power of moving the intellect or emotions. The third one, the act of influencing or suggesting opinions. The second one is drawing in of air, like inspiration. You inhale and exhale. The quality state of being inspired, something that inspires someone, and then inspiring agent. One of my favorite movies is Always. Has anybody ever seen this? Always, Richard Dreyfuss, Holly Hunter, and Audrey Hepburn. It's an old movie. He is a firefighter pilot, in the big B-52s that they drop the red stuff on the fires. He dies. Audrey Hepburn is his angel. And through the course of him figuring out what's going on, she's in the field with him, and they're watching the first time he took his solo flight. And she talked about inspiration. And the line was something like this: inspiration is the breath of God. When you are inspired, it's like God fills you up. Now, at the time I watched this, I didn't really, God, no, But if you look about God, divinity, it's the same thing. When you're inspired by something other than yourself. So the inspiration is the breath of God. I loved that line. So then I was thinking about breath. Now, spending 20 years as a massage therapist, I know about the systems in our body. The respiratory system. Everybody understand the respiratory system? We have lungs. When you breathe in, the correct word is alveoli. I said it right, alveoli. It's the millions of little air pockets, air sacs that are inside of our lungs. And what happens here, they're air sacs where the blood is the closest to the air. And at that moment, the oxygen absorbed into the blood and the carbon monoxide, predominantly carbon monoxide, is exhaled out. So that's our respiratory system. The respiratory system is an inhale and an exhale. Inhale, inspire, and an exhale. So when I think about the respiratory system, first of all, you'd be surprised to think that what we're breathing is not oxygen, believe it or not. It's only, what is it right here? 21% is oxygen. The air that we're breathing, it's just 21% oxygen. 78% is nitrogen, and then there's trace elements of argon, carbon dioxide, and methane. That's the air that we breathe. Now, of course, that depends on where you live. If we live in a more congested city, you're probably going to have a lot worse than that, like China. I know China's got really bad air. And then, of course, if you live in the higher elevations, the air's a lot cleaner, lighter. So anyway, every breath that I breathe in is an exchange of gases. So I'm going to play a little metaphor here, but every breath I breathe in, there's an exchange of gases without conscious thought or effort. It just happens. Now, those of us who have asthma, yeah, we struggle a little further breathing, but for the most part, we breathe and exchange the gases. And with asthma, I'm not really consciously aware, get rid of the oxygen. I mean, bring in the oxygen, get rid of the, it happens. So it's without conscious thought or effort. So just remember that. Then, I love playing with words. The respiratory system, respiration, sounds a lot like respite. So those of you who know what the word respite means a period of temporary delay. So respite is a period of temporary delay, an interval of rest or relief. Now, if I look at the word respite and respiration, when the air comes into the lungs and fills the sacs, there is a moment where it changes from inhale to exhale. That's the respite. That's the delay, where one process stops, another one starts, and then the other one stops, and the other one starts. So that's important to remember. Respite, like respiration. Now, if I think about inspiration, the respiratory system, part of the respiratory system is the pulmonary system. For those of you who know that, that's the heart. So the heart works with the lungs to deliver oxygen to the body. So the pulmonary system consists of your heart, your veins, and your arteries. The arteries send the blood out, oxygen-rich blood. The veins bring the oxygen-depleted blood back to the lungs. So it comes into the lungs, air comes in, the blood is filled with oxygen, sent to the heart. The heart sends that out to the rest of the system and then returns back the bad blood, dirty blood, and throws that back to the lungs. All of this happens without our conscious awareness, but the pulmonary system is important. So in order for me to take care of my body and inhale and exhale, it requires my lungs and my heart. So now it's not really a big leap for me to say this. Inspiration, inspire, that's inhale, respiratory system. Heart, metaphorically speaking, spirit, soul, whatever you want to call it. So in order for me to have inspiration, I must be connected to my heart. That's the jump I made. In order for me to have inspiration, I must be connected to my heart, and there has to be a period of respite. It doesn't happen, you can't force it. There's a period where there's an exchange. Now remember, the definition of inspiration is a divine influence. So in other words, in order for divinity to affect me, I must experience respite. I have to have a pause in order to receive communication. That's what it says, to receive communication, a sacred revelation. That's divinity. That's inspiration. Respite is required, and the connection to the heart. That's where I'm going with this. It's not set in stone. This is my own ideas here, so please don't type me back. No, that's not the way. I'm just saying this is what I'm thinking. So I'm just trying to come up with the idea of inspiration naturally is connected to our soul. Most everybody knows that, or spirit, or divinity, but we're inspired by something other than me. I don't know too many people that are inspired by themselves. I guess somebody could be. Ahmad is. But I guess you could be. I guess if you're arrogant enough, you would be inspired by what you've done. I would look more as motivated. I would be motivated by some of the things that I've done, but I'm more inspired by other people. I don't look to me for inspiration. I look to others for inspiration, just like others look to me for inspiration. So it's reciprocal. I understand that. But when I say that connection, like the connection happens when we're respite, and where inspiration is connected to the spirit, I agree with that statement. I made it, so I'm agreeing with it. So I feel like every profound inspiration, because there's different levels of inspiration. We can have those earth-shattering, change my life inspiration, and then the daily ones like, oh, that's a good idea, let me try that. We did the month of gratitude last year. That was just a daily inspiration. It wasn't, earth-shattering, and then I've had the earth-shattering ones. So every time I've had those profound experiences, I remember they came in a flash, and then it took me time to write it down and implement it. But I remember it came in those flashes. And in those moments of flashes, and I don't know if I'm going to describe this correctly, but those of you who had this experience, when you have that divine, profound inspiration, it's like time stops. You're aware of everything and nothing. You're connected to everything and nothing. It's like, it's hard to describe, but those are those moments where what just happened? And then when you come back to it, it's like time speeds back up. You actually feel time speeding back up to bring yourself back to the present moment, which again, very difficult to explain. So we feel energetic, we feel excited, enthusiastic, on fire. It's like we're jolted. I guess that's not the right word, because I know people get struck by lightning. That's not what I mean. But we do have that experience, like, what just happened? And most people, eyes are wide, take the deep breath. Most of the time when we have an aha, we go, we take that breath. Again, connecting us back to inspiration, inspiring, and the respiratory system that we have. So this can happen anywhere. Maybe you're working on a project and all of a sudden you hit a block, walk away from it, come back, boom, you've got the answer. Or it could be when you're doing chores, making dinner, out in the garden, cleaning the driveway, changing the oil in your car. You'll have a great inspiration. Lots of people have inspirations in the shower. Believe it or not, it's a number one thing. Swimming. Water is a really good conduit, but a lot of people have inspirations in the shower. I forgot the percentage rate, but I want to say it's like over 90% in the survey say that. Survey says over 90% of the survey people say that in the showers is when they have inspiration. And I always thought it would be a great thing to have a way to write it down in the shower, so it doesn't, you don't lose it. I actually used to have a radio that would record, so you could just press a button and say what your inspiration is. But what I found out is the shower is so loud you really don't hear you're speaking, because you hear the noise of the shower going. I always think that would be great. There, I'm giving somebody an inspiration. Create a shower inspiration collector. Anyway, the other thing that I find inspiration is excuse me, is in my dreams. So I'm the person, I know I'm jumping around here, I think I messed up here, but I'm a person that's very visual, and I have very, very vivid dreams. Always have, hopefully I always will. Sometimes in my dreams, I wake up and I don't know who I am, because I'm still the character that I was dreaming about. And one of my teachers had suggested to put a picture on the nightstand next to me to remind me. So I'd always have a picture of me, which is odd, but I'd have a picture of me or somebody I was with on the nightstand. And when I'd wake up and not know where I was, I immediately look to the nightstand and try to connect. And there were times where I'd wake up from a dream and I'd look over the picture and not recognize me. And then I think, who is that? Who is that? Oh, Anne-Marie. I know it's strange, but this is something I've grown accustomed to. My entire life has been this way, where my dreams have been so vivid. Sometimes I'll have a dream and I'll think it's a memory, that it actually happened. And I'll talk to someone saying, oh, remember when we did this? And they look at me like, no. And I'm like, but and I know sometimes I get this with my husband. He'll go, no. And I'm like, oh, oops, that was a dream. So in that instance, though, sometimes I'm very inspired. I can recall, like it happened last night, two very specific dreams that were completely life-changing. I woke up, wrote it down immediately. And as I wrote it, I was shaking. I remember I woke up and I was sweating and shaking. It was one of those experiences where you're like, what? So it's kind of like where Joseph Handel with the Messiah, and how do you put this in words and put it down? But I've been inspired sometimes from dreams. Now, I never go to sleep and say, okay, I'm going to have an inspirational dream. Again, like I said, you can't force inspiration. I can set intention. I can say, oh, tonight it would be nice if I can have an inspirational dream. But what I've discovered is those dreams happen at appropriate times in my life when I needed to say. I probably wasn't ready until it happened. So I can't set that up and, make it like, oh, tonight's the victorious night. There's no way to do that. That requires respite when it comes to inspiration. In the moments that we're, like I mentioned that, in the moments that we're looking for inspiration, we actually catch our breath or try to make it. There are people that I know that have tried to do inspiration. Force it. I'm going to force inspiration. It's going to happen. So one of the first ways I was introduced to this is many years ago, George had told me when I first started writing workshops. I looked that up today. My very first workshop I delivered in 2002. The first one that I actually wrote and delivered. There was a couple that I did for George, but the first ones I personally delivered was 2002. And I remember sitting there talking to George, and he said, so here's what he does. During his study groups, he would get up at 3 o'clock in the morning, set his alarm for 3 o'clock in the morning, get up, go into his office, turn on the light, turn on his computer. He'd have a bunch of books on his desk. He'd read a couple of words from various different books on different pages, and then he'd sit. The Word document would come up, and he'd look at the blank screen, and he would just sit and wait. I don't have the patience or tolerance to do that, but he did. Hours. He would say sometimes he'd be from 3 o'clock until 9 o'clock. That's 6 hours of not doing anything, just sitting and staring at the screen. And so I challenged him. I said, well, aren't you trying to force it? And he said, no. What I'm doing, it took me 6 hours to get my mind to stop being and then finally it came through. And then he would write the lesson. And typically when he wrote his lessons, those of you who remember the study groups, 9 to 15 pages. And then he would rewrite it as if he had never written it before. And then he'd look at the two copies and figure out which one was the best, and then he'd merge them together. He worked a great deal on writing the material. But that's how he saw inspiration. He'd sit and just be at the screen, and then he'd sit and put his hands on the computer. And they say sometimes he would just start typing, and then it would make sense. Anyone see the movie The Shining? Red rum. Jack Nicholson, very scary movie. But Jack Nicholson played this, Nicholson, is that his name? He played a writer, and they went up to a resort that was closed for the winter, and they were just like the keepers there, but it was haunted. And so he'd been writing and writing and writing, and all the while his wife thinks he's working, and she went over to the paper, and all it says is, all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. in page after page in different paragraph styles, but it was the same thing written over and over again. And George would say sometimes that's what he would do. He would just write a sentence over and over again until something would flow through. And if nothing flew through, he'd stop. And he'd just sit and wait. And then he'd say he'd sit and close his eyes and then open and see another book and look at another page, read perhaps a couple more sentences and just wait. Now, that, I would say, worked for him quite well because look at the volumes of material that he put out. But that may not work for everybody. Like for me, like I said, that's very difficult. The longer I sit in front of a screen, I know my mind. I'm going to sit, oh, let me check the email. Oh, let me just check over here and see if anybody responded back. Oh, what's Facebook going on right now? Oh, like I'm off. I'm onto Google. Let me research this word. Oh, look, have you ever gone to YouTube? 3 hours later. So, click on this video. Oh, look at this video. Oh, here's another video. Okay, got it. 3 hours. That's what happens when I sit in front of a computer. I like to write on a computer, but sometimes I like handwritten. I like to write by hand, but my carpal tunnel disallows that. But I do get inspiration from walking around. Now, I've lived with my husband long enough. He's known this. He's seen me walk around or I'll just organize things just to clear my head. And I'll just walk around and I'll come back and ask him a question, come back and ask, I do. And sometimes it bothers him because he's in the middle of doing something. But it's that walking around that gets me the inspiration. Because I know I'm consciously thinking, let it go, empty out whatever my thought is, change your focus. As a matter of fact, when George and I were working on Omega-4, we used to go up to Sedona, disconnect all the phones, and not go on the internet unless it was for research for a week at a time. Nicole would come up with us, sometimes Susan came up too, and we just totally work. I was just telling Mark's going to be out of town this week, and I'm like, oh, I wish I would have known that. I would have booked a room here so I could just unplug and know, because I know when I'm home, there's things to do. I've got laundry and kids can come over or they're shopping somewhere. I mean, there's things to do. You know, when you set time to do something and, oh, let me work in the garage and, oh, look, the backyard needs to be cleaned. And before you know it, you get distracted. So I like to be able to pull myself away and not be distracted. At least I like to do that. One time, Mark and I were in New Mexico and we got this cabin and Mark was going on a day trip with his dad. So I was in this cabin all by myself. Beautiful, up in the woods in the middle of nowhere. They left like at 4 in the morning. It was dark out. I had the whole day. I brought every piece of paper and file that I needed to work. I had several projects I was going to do. I sat down, I got my tea, I'm all ready. I'm trying to figure out how to start the fire because it's freezing and it's not a gas fire. You actually have to do the wood thing. I'm from New York, you flip a switch, like not happening. I spent several hours trying to figure out how to do the fire and then how to open all the windows because the smoke in the cabin, I forgot to open the thingy. Anyway, I sat down, made myself something to eat. Oh, you know, let me just check and see if there's music. I heard there's music on the TV. Oh, look, there's a TV show. There's a Billy Joel concert playing live. Not kidding you. Live. Oh, I'm going to watch this. Apparently it just started. 3 hours later. Oh, what else is on TV? Oh, I should have lunch. Maybe I'll go for a little walk. I went outside. Oh, no, too cold. Come back in. That's when I tried to do the fire. That didn't work. Literally, the whole day was like that because it was new and I wasn't focused. Like, it was like, whatever. So there are times when I'm successful, I go away, and then there's times when I'm not successful when I go. I did manage to do some of the work that I had brought up, but not everything I had envisioned. I felt so disappointed when Mark came back, and I was like, oh, I didn't finish. But anyway, sometimes, like I say, you can force inspiration, and then there's times at that moment, that weekend, I wasn't inspired. I had too many distractions, too many things to do, too many just not focused. Now, I know that there are people who talk about willpower, that if you have willpower, you can get yourself focused. I believe that to a point. Again, to the point of respite. I could focus myself and will myself to not think, but only for a short period of time. And then my mind, until I've mastered it, of course, those of you who understand meditation, I love meditating. Even meditating, there's only a certain amount of time before your mind starts wandering again. And then you have to bring it in. It's a practice, a practice. That's why they call it a practice. So for me, meditation and dreams are the two combinations that I do for inspirations. And so what works for me when I write Monday night workshops sometimes, I will go into a meditative state and then I'll open my eyes and I'll start writing. Or sometimes I'll go into a meditative state to try to figure out what I'm going to write about. There are times when I'll say, oh, I know what I'm going to do, and then change my mind because it doesn't feel right anymore. I know that this frustrates some people. George used to say it. He'd say he's waiting for a green light to write. And I would say the same thing. Oh, I'm waiting for the green light. It's not a go yet. I'm not 100% on it yet. It's just something I've worked on or tried to work on for the last couple of decades. I could say decades now. It is something I've worked on for over 20 years to try to create a space. One thing I really do love, I love my husband very much, but I really do love that he built me a meditation room in our house. It's my little office meditation reading room, but it's a place that I can go to and no one else goes in. No kids, no animals, no Mark. My room. So in that room, it's me. And I know there's something about stepping into that room where it's my energy, my space, and it's almost as if I sit down and boom, I'm connected. Now, not everybody has the luxury of having a place like that where it's the mine. Nobody else's energy is involved in there. No one's moving things. If I put my phone in a place, it stays there. If I put paper someplace, they stay there. Like nothing, no other energies around there except for the ghosts that comes and visit me every once in a while. But the idea of having that space, I love this. I love that I can walk in there, and because I know it's a place that I have inspiration, it happens that quickly. There are times where I just have to open the door and stand inside, and I'm immediately grounded. And then I can go back into the house again. It's off outside the house, so it's not easily accessible. So, as I said, meditation and dreams are the two that come down for me that help me with it. When it comes for meditation, as I said, it's the stillness of my body, the stillness of our mind. It's a practice to work on. Dreams, of course, you can't quite set that up. I mean, it's not like we have tonight I'm going to dream about. We just watched the movie Inside Out, where they have the dream team and they plug in. We don't have, in our brain, we don't say, tonight I'm going to dream about this. I know that there is a practice where you could put the suggestion in to dream about certain things and the dream technology. I understand that. And yet, we don't really have control over it. Many years ago, it might have been Carlos Castaneda, I learned that in your dreams, look for your hands. If you can find your hands, then you bring your consciousness and you can actually say, I'm dreaming. I've had this experience a number of times where I'll go, oh, I'm dreaming. And then I'll just go, oh, let me go here or let me go there. And I'll send myself to do, because I know I'm dreaming, or I'll wake myself up. I learned many years ago, my nightmares, they're all in the house that I grew up in, which makes complete sense to me. But in the nightmare, I'll be like, and all of a sudden I'll see my hands. I go, hands. It's a nightmare, and I will recognize that I'm in the house that I grew up in, and instantly I'm out. Either wake up or I flip to another dream. So I've had that experience that in my dreams, I've actually changed it to something else. There are times in my dreams where I'm aware, I wake up, and in my dream, I wake up knowing that I'm sleeping, but I just had a dream in my dream. That's very surreal. And when I wake up, I say, let me go to school, because there's this school that I go to. It's like this Greek place that I've been to many times. And let me just go to school. That's what I'll say. I'm going to go to school. And boom, I'm there. Or then I end up on my college campus not knowing where the classroom is, which is very frustrating too, running around. And then I have to remember, I'm dreaming. So I've had the experiences of, I think the most I've ever done it is 4 times where I've been asleep and I wake up in my dream knowing that I was sleeping, and then I wake up again knowing that I was sleeping and I'm still asleep. I've had it 4 times, where the 4th time I wake up in my dream going, okay, I've just dreamt 3 times now, or 4 times now, wake up. Because it gets to be very frustrating and very confusing. And then when you wake up, am I really awake? Because that's how some of the dreams end up being. You wake up and then you think, that's how some of my dreams are. I wake up and I don't know where, am I dreaming? Or everything looks the same, it all looks natural. Yes, this is where I am. And then here's the second part that I learned. So look for your hands and look for something that's wrong or off. So one of the dreams that I was doing where I realized I was dreaming, there was a clock behind me and the handles were going the other way. So I woke up in the dream thinking, okay, am I awake now? Or is this, all right, this looks normal. This feels like wood. Yes, I feel like this is it. And I turn and look at, okay, the clock, wait, the clock hands are going the wrong way. And as soon as I said the clock hands are going, I woke up again. So I've had that series. I don't know how to get out of that. I don't know how to tell you except for the two suggestions that I know. Look for your hands and then look for something that's wrong. But aside from that, when I do wake up in my, I don't know how to say that right. When I'm in my dream and I'm aware that I'm sleeping, that's when I'm able to send myself to a place to get inspiration. I can do that. I've tried to go visit George. I've tried to do astral projection. I've tried to do that. I've tried to go visit people that have passed on. My adopted dad, I've tried to go see him. Or sometimes I see my animals, like dogs and cats that have passed away, and they'll actually be talking to me, and I'll be having conversations with them, and then I'll go, wait a second, you're talking. And well, of course I'm talking. And I'm like, what? That's not right. And then, of course, you wake up because animals don't talk to us. They meow and bark. Anyway, I went off on a...
Could you do reading numbers?
I'm trying to get the Powerball numbers. I really am, but it just doesn't seem to work. I did have several dreams. Huh?
You're trying to force the...
I'm trying to force the inspiration. I cannot force Powerball numbers. I always seem to know what they are the day after. Anyway, when it comes to inspiration, I've learned through the years that you can be inspired anywhere. Sometimes I've been inspired at a traffic light. As a matter of fact, one of the best workshops that I wrote, or articles that I wrote, I was at a traffic light, and I watched these two people crossing the road. And they were two very unlikely people. There was a businessman in a suit, and he had his attaché case, and then there was this gangster kid on a skateboard, droopy pants and long hair and a backwards hat. And I remember, so the guy had just gotten off of the train, and the kid had just come off of a bus, and they met at the corner. And I thought, oh, I wonder what this interaction is going to be like. And it was amazing. They acted like they were best friends. They were talking and laughing and cracking. And I'm like, two strangers just met on the corner, and I would have never, and I wrote an article about that. So I got inspired by watching something in the traffic. I just happened to be at the stoplight and watched these two people. So with that, I would say inspiration also requires observation, to observe. So you're respite and you observe what's happening. At least for me, I observe what's happening and then I get inspired. Sometimes the inspiration isn't what I want, because I have an attachment or agenda. And what I've realized is when I'm attached to having a certain thought and it doesn't happen, those are some of the worst workshops that I've done because it wasn't inspired. I forced it. Oh, I'm just going to write it and make it. And it's usually, I know, usually by the time I'm done writing, I shouldn't deliver this. And the times that I've done, I go, oh, I can't believe I just delivered that. So through the years, thankfully, I've gotten a lot better to where now it kind of flows with me, or I just don't write it. I just know it's not here. I remember a conversation George had once had with me, and he said, essentially you should start writing the workshops in advance so you have a stash of them, because eventually you're going to lose your talent. What do you mean? No, I'm a good writer. I know I could. And it's happening now, where it'll take me a day or two or three or a week, and I'm not inspired. And I'm like, uh-oh, I should have listened to what George said. So now, this year, I'm committed to at least trying to write a workshop a week. So I'll have some back for me, because I actually walked up to Mark this afternoon, and said, let's see, it took me 1 hour to write 3 pages. If I can, in 100 hours, I'll have 300 pages written. That's enough. I mean, that's a book right there. But if I really committed to myself to doing it, I could probably do it now, while I have it flowing and it doesn't leave me. The last thing I want to mention is to remember the quote at the beginning. 1% inspiration, 99% perspiration. So it's 1% that it happens, And then to manifest it or to write it or to work, whatever it is that you're doing, creating music requires effort. And sometimes we can get frustrated with that because it doesn't happen as fast as the inspiration. We get frustrated because, I want it now. Impatience can come into play. But as long as we work on manifesting it, sometimes it does happen. It can happen like that, or it might take a lifetime for things to unfold. We were talking about Oprah Winfrey on the way to the workshop tonight, and I was talking about the idea. I never saw her when she was on TV. I was working, so I never saw her while she was on TV. I've seen YouTube clips of her. Am I out of time? Oh, I've seen YouTube clips of her, and I've been inspired by listening to the things she's done. And the thing that I really like about her, I think she is very inspirational, but we were talking about being at the right place at the right time. She also surrounded herself with the right people, like the right investors, the right talent agencies. She was the first woman to have a talk show and a magazine, and her company, where she owned her own studio then and started producing film. She just had the right inspirations or the right people around her to guide her, and it seems like it just clicked. And then I was thinking about other people that had daytime talk shows. Joan Rivers, remember she used to have a talk show? Diana Shaw, I don't remember her name, Shore. She had a talk show. Bonnie Hunt had a talk show. Of course, Rosie O'Donnell had I'm talking about women that were in that. Of course, John Davis was a talk show. Merv Griffin, Donahue had talk shows. But none of them compared to what Oprah did. I mean, she was phenomenal, and I really think it just clicked. Ellen DeGeneres, I think, is going to, if she continues on, is probably going to bypass Oprah, but because she has she's gone into a clothing line. So she does clothing, and as well as a whole other humanitarian efforts, that same thing that Oprah did. But anyway, we're talking about how sometimes it seems like it clicks. I think that's inspiration. So Oprah just happened to be at the right place at the right time, found the right people to support her, and boom, it took off. I think the same thing with George. He happened to be at the right time, at the right place to start Omega, and boom, it took off. We're on the ending part of that. I mean, there's an ebb and flow, and hopefully when we get back to our own building, we'll be able to create that space again. One of the hardest things is because we're in a shared space, we're not creating Omega energy. It's just when we're here. That was one of the nice things about having our own building. People who would be there knew. You walked in and you felt it. Just like my meditation room. I walk in and I feel it. So that's the thing I feel the most struggle, is that we don't have our space. This still feels okay, but it's not ours. I know it's not ours. So my inspiration for you tonight, those of you who play the Powerball, please keep in mind, Omega's still looking for a building. We'd love to have our own space again. I think that would make a good difference, or a tremendous difference in the energy of Omega. So anyway, those are my ideas on finding inspiration in the most unexpected places. It's the respite. That was my closing. The unexpected place is the respite, where there is no place. It's the non-place where exchanges happen. So just like the oxygen and carbon monoxide pause to let each other go through, the same thing with inspiration. You stop thinking and pause for one moment for the divine connection, or communication, to assist us with inspiration. So thank you all for joining me this evening. I appreciate everybody who's watching, and I appreciate everyone who showed up tonight. I look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks on Wednesday when we do our next Monday night workshop, and I will let you know what the topic is as soon as I get inspired. Have a good night. Bye now.